Hello, and welcome to the Alchemists Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people. I feel like this time I just want to be like your spiritual podcast for grounded people, holding up a tarot deck and a grounding crystal. That is so like our podcast in a nutshell.
It is. I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn.
I'm going to grab my grounding crystal too. Now that you mention it, I'm just gonna.
You know what? Today is a good day for that. It's a really good day for that. I was looking at the astrology today. We're just coming out of this T-square that happened last week with the eclipse, which is really conflicting and like pivotal conflict. What's another like butting of heads kind of energy in this crucible energy of the eclipse. And then over the weekend, that square and opposition through like with big deal characters actually moved into a grand trine with the moon and Jupiter and Venus. And it was like this really great soothing, like blessing kind of salve on the burn feeling. And we're still experiencing that. That just finished up today, Monday, Monday the 14th. That just finished up a few hours ago as the moon moved into Leo. And now eclipse season is over as well. So I think even this week, if I look at my notes, is this the week? This is the week, you guys, where we move into Sagittarius season on the 22nd as well.
It is indeed.
And then we get our first new moon outside of eclipse season.
Cheers for eclipse season being over.
Yes, that one was rough. And I will tell you though, you guys, for everyone who's been having rough eclipses last October, then in April and May, and now this past month or so, this cycle of eclipses is actually winding down. So if you are someone with your angles with Taurus and Scorpio somewhere, and it's been like, dang, that is actually coming to a close. The very next eclipse we have is on April 20th. And I think that one's the first one that dips into Aries. Then we have another one on the Taurus Scorpio axis. And then we start moving into a new axis for the eclipses, a new cycle for them. So you're almost there, you guys. The story has now reached the climactic moment, and we'll have the resolution over the next few months.
Cool. Resolution will be cool. I'm ready for that.
Yeah, I could use some like closing of the loops in my life. That there's been a lot of open loop tension in my life lately. So yeah,
loops would be good. Well, yeah. What is going on with the astrology this week? Let's touch on that before we dive into what we're going to do for this episode. As a quick reminder for everybody, our episode topics are voted on by our patrons. Thank you, patrons. You guys are awesome. Yay, claps for you. You're so fantastic. We appreciate you. And this week, they really wanted us to talk about our experiences working with deities. That was one of the options to vote on, and that one won kind of considerably. So that's what we're going to do. And of course, we'll also answer a question that also comes from our patrons. And if you want to be a patron and you want to say in what we do, please join our Patreon. The information is all below and around, etc. One other piece of housekeeping too, the pitches are open for the Forgotten Storytellers.
Yes.
Pitch us your story idea, guys, for our next cohort. Our next cohort is starting in January, and we're really excited about it. We're kind of revamping some stuff with the program. It's going to be awesome. The writing retreat this time is actually going to be in a new location, and we're stoked on that. But yeah, if you have an idea for a high vibration fiction book, we want to help you write it. The program lasts 4 months, and you'll have your first draft done by the end of it. That's what we do. So, and
along the way, you will learn a lot about your own spiritual connections. You will learn a lot about navigating your own chart and the chart of your characters and astrology. And it's just a really great, well-rounded program. I love that we get to do this and that we were like, wait, what? No, astrology or spirituality or writing? No, everything. And that's what we've done.
All the things.
Just make it all one thing. Yeah.
And we did, and it works. It's really awesome. And if you're wondering like what other people have thought about it, on our website, so ForgottenStorytellers.com, we do have a lot of testimonials and things on there as well. If you're like curious to find that out, and all of the in-depth, like detailed information is on there as well. So feel free to read over and submit your pitches. Send them this way, please.
We love reading them. You will never get a rejection from us. You might get a like not aligned email if it's not something we feel we can support, but it's not because the story is not good. It's because we're not the right people to cultivate it, and you've got something different waiting for you. But a lot of the time we are the right people to cultivate it, and we get really excited to be able to do this with you. So on the chance that the universe wants us to conspire together to bring your book into creation, we would love to be there for that. That's the
Yes.
joy. Yeah.
And the really cool thing about it, and people who have been in past cohorts can attest to this and are listening and definitely, I think, probably agree.
Hi guys, miss you.
Yeah, all of you. The bond that happens within the cohort,
Oh
like
my
the
gosh.
universe 100% puts together the authors you're supposed to have writing with you. And it's the coolest, most magical thing to witness ever.
Yeah, it is.
So beautiful and interesting, and to just, oh, it's fabulous. I love it so much.
And we hold ourselves accountable to really steward that. One of the things that we do as we're really asking guides and channeling your stories when you pitch us is, you know, the group that is going to be there. Is this the right group for that person? And sometimes the next group or the group before or whatever. But we make sure that the people who are supposed to be together find each other at the perfect time. And that is something we are always keeping in mind as we read into the energy of each pitch. And so when we reach out to you, we already know you're perfect. You're perfect for this cohort. So that's one of the things that we get really excited about.
Yeah, very, very much so. It's wonderful. We love it so much. So yes, and that's also why with having the groups, it's also so that you can have a group of contemporary authors, so that when you're publishing your work, you have people already in your court that are going to shout to the rooftops about it, and you can shout to the rooftops about theirs. And it is something that is invaluable to have, and it's very hard for authors to have them. And so we install it for you personally, basically.
Well, and it's so nice that when you release your book, you're not the only one getting excited. Like if you saw my TikTok lately, I made a mistake. The eclipses were angular for me, and my life has been really chaotic. And among all that, I actually totally forgot I had a book release. So on November 12th, the second book of the Shifted series came out, Stranded, and I hadn't told anybody. So I was like, by the way, guys, here it is. But in that video, we also show you some of the techniques that we use to help people actually consciously release their book with good divine timing, with that flow of energy beneath its wings to really help with that. But the best thing you can do is have those writers who are going to be excited with you. So that's the joy of having a cohort.
Yeah. So anyway, that's about the Forgotten Storytellers. We love you. Please join.
Yes.
We want you. We want your books to be on the shelves as badly as you want your book to be on the shelf. Like, I promise.
Yeah. And the shelves need better books, gotta say. So
they really do.
That could be you. And it probably is.
Yeah. And I promise, right? I know it sounds really quick, but writing a book in 4 months, super achievable, especially with all the techniques we give you on how to do it in a really aligned way. It's pretty incredible.
And I mean, Neil Gaiman and Stephen King both swear by a 3-month process. It's something I've really aligned with as well. And we do 4 to give like that extra time together. But also astrologically, did you know 3 months is about a Mercury cycle?
Oh, that's cool.
How perfect, right? Yeah.
It's like we plan things.
Or like it just aligns with the universe naturally because it's supposed to be here.
Right.
Yeah. Much like your story.
It's always just blown our minds because it's always felt so just aligned. And if you've ever had a feeling of deep alignment where things just worked, that's how this feels with us every time. And it's so freaking wonderful. So anyway, besides
there it is.
Those are the things we got going on. So Krista, tell us what is going on with the stars. How are the stars poking at us this week?
You know, speaking of like open and closed loops, this week we have it begins on the 18th for our listeners anyway. On the 18th, the sun will form a sextile to Pluto, closing a loop with Pluto before they, you know, when they're going to conjoin. Sorry, I have hiccups. When they conjoin in December. So this is a cycle that began sometime around last December, really. And now we're kind of coming to the closure of that. It's a spiritual transformation, death and rebirth kind of thing. It's very Plutonian. So whatever you've been really walking through the trials of fire and really refining yourself through on a spiritual level or a soul level feels even more aligned. This is your opportunity to really evolve. And if you're looking to finally get rid of something in your life and purge it, your opportunity to say, no, this is the final time. Like, here's my boundary. This is gone now. It's like you're exercising bad habits or negative things from your life. That opportunity will be there. And it's a sextile. So it's an opportunity. You don't have to, it won't be forced on you, but the energy will be there if you choose to use it. It's like, choosing between two coats. It's kind of chilly outside. I could take a coat. It's there on the hanger if I need it. And I might, I just might decide to use it. So I don't like to spread fear about Pluto, because I think poor Pluto, dreary as he can be, if you've ever seen my skits, I think Pluto's just a force of nature. And I'm going to be talking about that in one of my stories about dealing with deities too, because there was a very Plutonian or Platonic deity that I got to experience in Egypt. On the 19th, we have Mars, which is still retrograde in Gemini, squaring Neptune, which is still retrograde in Pisces. And those two, it's a very interesting energy, because Mars is really wanting to get stuff done, but there's a lot of hurdles. It's like Mars is going through edits and there are typos everywhere. And Neptune is like, but what is a word anyway? And so we're running into this situation of like, do I really have the energy to do this? Is this really what I wanted to do in the first place? I know it's going to slow me down even more, but how can I make sure that this feels aligned? So it's very similar to like, if you're pitching a story, you're kind of on the fence about, do I send it? Don't I send it? This is a great time for muscle testing. Let the muscles, the Martian or the Martial kind of energy really tell you yes or no with a definitive answer. So you're not sitting there waiting through the sea of subconscious looking for answers, thanks to Neptune. You might also find that your words are a little bit tongue-tied around this time. Looking at the 20th, the sun will trine Jupiter, which means Jupiter's getting ready to station direct. He's not doing it just yet. We have a couple days before he does, but he's getting ready. When the sun trines an outer planet, they're getting ready either to begin their retrograde or to finish it. And at this point, Jupiter's getting ready to finish it. Also warm and fuzzy time, because Jupiter is domicile. The sun is warm. The sun's in Scorpio, which is why they're able to trine, but it's still nice to just sit in your fuzziest blanket and even have some alone time, or, do some spiritual work, some divination work on your own time. It'll be a great time for us to release that video we're doing for our Patreons, where we do a card pull this month. So we'll be able to look into that. We'll have that to help and guide you through what that looks like. And then the 21st, right before Sagittarius season, we do have Mercury conjunct Venus. So be aware of gossip or juicy rumors around this time, because Mercury and Venus in Scorpio. Venus is not really at her best. She's in detriment in Scorpio, and Mercury is always chatty and kind of mischievous. Right now, it's a time where we might notice that we're inclined to listen to the gossip, and that's fine. Be entertained. Don't spread something you're not sure of. Always check your facts. Use that Scorpio energy to dig and do the research and find the source and unearth the truth. I think that's going to be really helpful. You might also have to deal with some people who are doing the whole well actually thing, and they might well actually you when they haven't done their research. So also know when to pick your arguments, because Scorpio is Mars ruled, and Mars with that mutual reception with Mercury right now, they're kind of chatty. And so we want to make sure that we're choosing our arguments wisely, and we're doing it from a place not of anger and reaction, but from response and feeling sturdy in our own belief. Then we have the 22nd and the 23rd, where the 22nd is Sagittarius season, followed immediately by a new moon on the 23rd in Sagittarius. So what we've got going on there is really the 23rd, the moon will just make personal what the sun is already declaring for Sagittarius season, because the sky is going to be really similar from one day to the next, except for the moon. And so we see Sagittarius season has a lot going on, where we're just walking our talk and taking leaps of faith and really figuring out, like, do I really believe that? What is this action motivated by? What belief is behind that action? How does my experience support or even reject this? And now how do I consciously live my life and aligned with my beliefs? How do I align my beliefs with how I want to consciously exist? So those are things to really manifest with this new moon, because yay, we're out of eclipse season and it's the first new moon. So if you're someone who likes to manifest with new moons, this one is a lot safer to work with. It's not as unpredictable as an eclipse can be. So we're pausing in reverence before moving forward, thanks to this whole Sagittarian thing. Sagittarius is kind of the journeyman, the traveler, even priest-like. It's a great time to really realign, reconnect with any energies, deities, or, other energies that you connect with, your guides and whatnot. And just really reconnect with yourself and your own higher self. Great time for that too. And the affirmation that I recommend is, I am whatever I decide I am.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And that's the week. So as you can tell, we're coming into the last days of November. Literally every day, for the most of it, has a transit, and goes straight into December, where literally every day has something going on for a lot of it as well. So apologies for the run on there, but there it is. And if you want more details on that, we do have an actual astrology overview for the month of November that you can check out as well.
On the YouTube.
Yeah.
The tube of you.
The tube of you.
Yeah, awesome. I am personally excited to get back to normal moons, not eclipsy moons. I honestly, I really like full moon eclipses quite a bit. Their energy is always very sustaining for me. I don't know what that's about, but I like being able to manifest and do the work I want to do on the moon cycle. So I'm pretty stoked about it, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I usually get very, my interest is usually really peaked with eclipses, but that's, I think, our Scorpio moons talking. We're like, ooh, drama, like transformation. Yes, please. Even when we're on the receiving end, like as I'm going through the turbulence of my life, which has been very extra active over the last 2 weeks, even today, I'm just like, okay, but what was happening in the astrology? Because this confirms things. So there's a lot of connections to be made, and like a lot of, ooh, change. Yes, this is good. This is, something new to really get hyped about, which is a very Scorpio moon thing. Like, how can we dig up some of the stuff and make us feel intense? So, yeah.
I'm about having a Scorpio moon. It's great.
Yeah,
Also,
I might feel it intensely, but at
Jupiter
least
going direct.
Yes.
Jupiter going direct.
Yes.
Let's
and I'll
do
tell
the direct Jupiter.
That makes all but one planet move, or all but two planets at this point moving direct. We're still waiting on Neptune. And of course, Mars will go direct again in January. And then we'll have all planets direct for quite a little while. I think in between, we do have a Mercury retrograde, but that's Mercury. He does that.
Yeah. I'm stoked. I'm thrilled. It's going to be great.
I'm ready.
Yeah. So let's talk about some experiences we've had with deities. So we did do a spooky story time, air quotes on spooky, a couple of weeks ago, right? Where we told just some kind of ghost stories, some things we've experienced with that. That's different for us than our deity experiences quite significantly. Usually deity experiences are particularly activating. They reveal themselves. Something about it is very, for your benefit and growth, and less of because it exists and is over there, like ghosts are.
Yeah.
So when we share this, do want to keep a couple things in mind. Not all deities are guides. Sometimes they have their own agendas, so just keep that present in your head. And then also, just because we had these experiences, I think, at least for me, I didn't call in many of these. They just kind of went down. And that's how it works. So we do work with deities respectively. Both of us do, in different ways. But I just don't want you to think like, this is the norm. You call in a deity and they do this stuff. This is stuff that's just happened to us in our many, many years of doing this. When you do deity work, it doesn't always have to be this much. If that makes sense.
Yeah, sometimes you just encounter deities and that's okay. And so you don't want to encounter deities all the time. Like the first one I'm going to share today, I would not want this experience every day. But it was catalyzing for my life and really amazing and transformative in that moment. So I'm glad I had that moment, but every day I think it would do me in.
Yeah. So let's start with that then. What is your first experience you want to share? Story time.
So I had this really great opportunity right before the pandemic. It was actually July of 2019. I had the opportunity to go to Israel in July. And then in October, I went to Egypt. So these two really charged up energetic places and two sides of what you would consider a spiritual coin in a lot of ways. And for the purposes of differentiation, I do consider the Christ energy and Jesus to be sort of deity energy. because it is separate from angel energy, which I also would work with in sort of a deity way. So if you had an angel encounter, I would consider that kind of a deity energy, especially if you're someone who like Archangel Michael is someone I've dealt with a lot. I consider that more deity, less guide. So that's one of the things, if you're a Christian and you're like, deity work, yeah, actually you do that too. Here's what it looks like when you put it into our language or into that language. So there was a lot of deity work as far as encountering Jesus, the person, and Christ, the energy in Israel. Because I was going to a lot of places and I was like, okay, give me the actual story. Like as we walked the road of roses or the path of roses where Jesus was supposed to have carried the cross. I was just like, okay, what did you see? What did you feel? What am I supposed to be getting out of this experience? And it was funny because I was like the psychic at the back of the tour group, trying not to let everybody know on this hyper Christian tour what was going on. And I felt like, especially with the group that I was with, there were a lot of people that I don't think really aligned with the Christ energy as well as they could have. And we went to some locations that are a bit not conflicting. I'm really at a loss for words today. Thanks, Mars and Neptune, I guess. But kind of hyper vigilant. Let's put it that way. You know, we went into Bethlehem, which is not really the safest place according to certain people's definitions. I felt totally safe there. The people were amazing. Just saying. And in those places, we actually like went to where Jesus was supposed to have been born. And there was a big pillar of golden light there, as from what I call seventh plane and is synonymous to like heaven energy. It was there and it was still there. And I encountered so many angels just sort of standing in these places, watching people go by. And I got to have conversations with them where there are times where you can kind of communicate almost directly and be a voice box, but you have to do that carefully. Got to do that for my family as we kind of separated from the group to really say, by the way, this is the propaganda. This is the message they want you to hear, but here's what the actual message is. Here's what the real energy is. So there were like two different positions where Jesus's tomb might have been. One of them had two angels sitting there and they had a lot to say. So that's what my personal belief is. That's probably the actual one, not the one with the giant church built on top of it now, the one that's actually still kind of like a garden, go figure. But then in Egypt, out of some crazy thing, I went from like this tour group, can't really access my spiritual stuff because I have to hide it from these people, to everybody on the tour group backed out, except for me, my parents, and my mentor at the time, and the tour guide. And the tour guide, in order to be a tour guide in Egypt, you also have to be an Egyptologist. So you have a lot of information. He also happened to be a very knowledgeable spiritual person. So he was taking us to all of the like places that you don't often get to go and helping us read into the energy and like holding us back. And there was only 4 of us in the group. So we got to do a lot of things, including visiting this one statue of the goddess Sekhmet, who is she is a goddess of destruction. She is standing in her power as compared to Mut, who is a version of her sitting in her power. It's like the divine feminine enraged, the divine feminine chilling. And so she's given the whole like flooding of the Nile, destruction for rebirth kind of thing. And we were told that this statue is very potent. Like when you go to visit this statue, you're almost certainly going to have an experience. And I was like, well, I'm ready for that. And I also checked my transits for the day, and there was a Pluto transit. And so I was just like, this day has a lot going on for me, including Pluto. From what you've told me about Sekhmet, she's got a lot of Pluto going on with her. So I'm ready for whatever I need to receive, was the idea. And I was like, I'm super Plutonian anyway. I've got Pluto on my ascendant with my moon, like bring it on. What more could I take? Right. I was cocky. So as we went in, people are known to have gone into the statue and like a bone has broken and stuff like that when they came back out. I didn't expect this. But when I did go in, I was very consciously aware of looking at the statue and it animated. And I'm not someone who says that lightly. Like usually if someone would say that to me, I'd be the first to be skeptical about it. And so I thought I was alone. I thought everybody was away and wouldn't be able to hear me and stuff like that. So I see the energy overlay on this statue of it being animated, and she is a lioness. So it was the cat-like face, but it looked so aged and sad. And immediately I was terrified, because one of the things that I was fearing at the time, as I was about to turn 30 and in my Saturn return, was like, what do I do with my life? How do I remain relevant? How do I, how do I go into age and adulthood and all of these things and continue to be useful? And so in my mind, in my subconscious, age or old age meant the lack of use, which is not something I believe anymore, but I don't think I consciously believe that either. You can be useful and amazing at every age and every phase. But this statue started looking at me and it was like, you need to love me. And I was like, I can't, I'm sorry. I just can't. Like, this is repulsive to me for some reason. And it was like, no, you need to love me. And there was this moment, like, I just ended up backing out right into the arms of my mom and my mentor. And they were like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, it was weird, but why? And they're like, you went in there and started apologizing, just saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, over and over and over again. And then they said, did you do the thing? And I was like, what thing? We were supposed to do a thing. So you're supposed to go in and approach the statue and touch the like third eye, touch the heart. And then that's what you're supposed to do. I was not told this. So I was like, well, I have to go back in. I have to do this, but I'm holding my mommy's hand as I do it. So in this maiden mother crone kind of moment, I went back in holding my mom's hand and the statue looked perfectly fine, but I could still feel the voice in my head. So I was able to approach the statue and I touched my third eye, her third eye, my heart, her heart, and was able to say, like, I accept you. I can love you because you're a reflection of me and I can learn to love myself. So that was an awesome thing. But then my parents both did it. And if I told you, I don't know what happened, because it's of course going to be a transformational experience. Coming out of there, all of a sudden, all three of our roles in our normal dynamic got reversed. And so like where I would normally be like the spiritual one, I was on the receiving end of some like critical energy. My mom was like this peacekeeper between me and my dad, who was usually the peacekeeper. And so it was this weird thing. And our guide was like, he basically said, effing Sekhmet every time. I don't know, because like I'm crying, dad doesn't know what to do, mom's trying to keep everything like normal, and we're just trying to see a museum or a temple. And so we had to like pull over because it's just us. And the guide was like, every time, I know, it's fine, just take whatever time you need. But our relationship after that, like I understood them in such a new way and they understood me in such a new way, and we have not been the same ever since, and I would not go back for anything. And then immediately after that, I had this great experience standing in like a doorway where I saw hieroglyphics, told them to our guide, and it actually formed a sentence. So it was a very catalyzing day, which was cool. I think Sekhmet puts the cat in catalyst. This whole story was just a build up to a pun. Yes, I'm kidding. It actually happened.
It's like the longest pun joke ever.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, that was a long one. So I apologize, but that was two deity stories in one. Yeah,
but they apply together. It's interesting. Yeah, I have an interesting view of like angel stuff. I think archangel stuff would be deity work, but there's so many different types of angels. There's so many. That it's like there's a lot that you can tune into and have guides and work with and all sorts of stuff. So
and I have to say I've dealt mostly with archangels because I did integrated energy therapy, which is angel healing kind of stuff. You work with them to help facilitate healing for a person here. That was one of my first and favorite healing modalities. So I called in like, Ariel was the one that you focused on the most because she's of healing and stuff like that. So I would bring in a lot of that energy.
That's fun. I appreciate that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Okay. So the first deity experience I will share, this is like right when I was like in my baby steps of my spiritual reawakening, I guess I'll say, where I'm just trying to figure out like who my guides are. I had already met Hope, and I think I've shared those stories on here before, of meeting her and her talking to me through my DVD player, all of that jazz. So I'd already like met her and I knew she was around. But I was having a particular day and the kids were at daycare and I was just home cleaning by myself and I had music going, and the buildup of it, I was getting increasingly frustrated with what the fuck am I doing here? Sort of energy, to be totally honest. And not just like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't know my next steps, because at the time I was thrilled with what I was doing in life. I knew my next steps, all of that jazz. It wasn't so much that, it was I incarnated for why. So like a lot of that sort of energy. And I was particularly frustrated, and I was like really going through a lot of healing stuff from my ex and all sorts of stuff at the time. And I remember being like, well, if someone has it figured out, then you better fucking tell me why I'm here, like yelling at the sky. And immediately I was physically grabbed and halted, like like hands on my shoulders, grabbed and stood there. And I had already clarified that my house was not haunted. It was just Hope messing around. So my first instinct was like, oh, is this Hope? Like, and then the like hands squeezed more. And I was like, nope, not Hope. Okay, cool. I guess I'm going to stand here, try not to panic. And then I got like completely comforted with this very deep warmth energy, as if you were standing very intensely in like a, in the sunlight and you were almost to the point of sunburn. It felt like that. And then the song switched to the Elton John song. Oh God. Now, of course, I'm not gonna be able to think of it. It's an Elton John song about
Tiny
the world is.
Dancer.
Nope.
Going. Candle in the Wind.
Nope. Hold on.
Rocket Man.
No. And
Crocodile Rock.
No, my guide is purposely keeping it back because he thinks it's fucking hilarious. Hold on. Anyway, and I was forced to stand there and listen to all of the lyrics of the song. And
it Leave On?
No, it wasn't your song. It was your song.
Oh.
Which is
That's not the one that comes to my mind.
No, yeah. But basically it's talking about how the world is better that you're in it. So just shut up, basically, is that story. And then I was like, okay, like, I'll shut up. Sorry I asked. Like, my bad. Thank you for the song. But it felt so calm and loving, and the hands released. And right then, the clouds moved and sun shone in through the window to where I was standing. It was a perfect square of sunlight from where I had been physically stopped. And that was the first time I actually saw Apollo, and he identified himself as one of my guides. And I was like, oh shit, okay. So it wasn't Hope grabbing me, and I'm not haunted. So yay for me. But it was a super intense experience. Like I went basically blind for a second so I could actually like see his energy and see him. And I was like, okay. And then the song ended and I came back to my body and everything was normal. But I didn't have that question again, at least not as openly. And I've worked with him very consistently as a guide ever since. So he's pretty much around all the time. He was before anyway. I just wasn't working with him or acknowledging that. And Hope is so corporeal. She physically interacts with like the stuff around me constantly anyway. So she was always the one that I could feel even as a kid. But yeah, so that was like one of my first like major deity experiences, which also at the time confirmed for me, because I was debating how to move forward with a lot of spiritual stuff. I was reading a ton of different books on a ton of different practices, all this stuff. And it confirmed that I needed to dive into some Hellenic polytheism, which is what I ended up practicing for about 2 years after that, like very heavily, and doing a lot of very intense ritual-based stuff with that. And that experience kind of pushed me in that direction, which of course I don't practice that so much anymore, but I have channeled very, very many deities, both from that pantheon and other pantheons because of that experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and it's really funny. Like a great point that I think you bring up that a lot of our listeners might relate to is that the guides are always there. They may not identify straight out as Apollo because sometimes we're not ready. Like my first guide identified to me in a song too, but it was Fernando by ABBA. So I see this guide like sitting down in front of me and I hear Fernando and I'm like, I guess your name's Fernando. Years later, it was like, nope, actually I'm Archangel Michael, but you weren't ready to believe in me at that point, like in that way. So you might be working with a guide who is also a deity, but it's going to be in your own time. It's going to be in the right time. It's going to be like, you may not even have explored the oh my God, you just said the word. It's a great word for the set of gods. The Pantheon. There it is. I'm like polytheism. No, pantheon. That they are from yet. So they will be there with you and sometimes even connect with you. And then you'll get to know them more and more. And they'll go from being Fernando to actually Archangel Michael, which if you work with Michael, I hope that you're understanding and like nodding your head right now that is so on brand for him. Yeah.
Very much so. Very much so. And now every time I need validation that I have made the right choice or that I'm not alone or going in the right direction, I will either hear that song, like someone will turn it on or it'll be on the radio or whatever, or it'll pop in my head and get stuck in my head for the rest of the day.
That's phenomenal.
So yeah, he now uses it to troll me.
Nothing like an earworm because
right. Yeah. All right. What's your next story? What else you got? Deity work.
Oh man, deity work. So I've like called in divine energy of like, I work a lot with, again, like God, but source creator God.
Yeah.
I think that there's kind of a step, and not necessarily, I don't know how I feel about Gnosticism, but I do agree that there's this sort of God we've created, or an image of God we've created, that very much suits that whole demiurge feeling.
Mhm.
Can be a little bit more wrathful and a little bit less divine and unconditional loving. So I work a lot with what I call like source energy or creator energy, which I learned more of through theta healing, like you did.
Mhm.
And just, dealing with certain situations and certain people. I've had to do certain situations, and it always happens in a Bob Evans, where I'll get these moments, they're my step aside moments, where I end
Mhm.
up channeling directly from this source energy, and I'm just not there. My whole face, like the muscles in my face hold themselves a different way. So my face kind of changes, which is really cool. But again, you got to be really careful with that kind of thing. If something ever tells you to step aside, you tell it to, like, you ask why, first of all, like, big deal to always know who you're dealing with. And I deal a lot with Jesus. I shared the story, I think on our spooky episode, about helping my first grandmother pass, and having to work with Jesus to do that, and that kind of energy. I've worked with Jesus in healing, of course, especially using Brahmarai.
Yeah.
And, I was working with a friend of the family when I was first learning healing, and she was experiencing cancer. And she had 3 months to live, but her daughter's wedding was in like 2. The months may be off a little bit, but it was that kind of situation. And I remember tapping in and saying, okay, what is my role in this? What do I do? Because I don't want to try to force something. I know that there's
Yeah.
there's stuff that happens that my perception of bad might not fit. And it was just like, keep going with it, keep going with it. Well, she was completely cancer free, no chemo bag or anything, dancing at her daughter's wedding. It was amazing. Couple years later, though, the cancer did come back.
Mhm.
And I was on a trip in Ecuador. And when I found out, I let myself feel the feelings. And then I tuned in and I said, okay, what's my role in this? It came back for a reason. What's going on here? And all I was given was, keep doing what you're doing. Let her be comfortable. And I was like, okay, so we are just going day by day by day with this, and
Mhm.
whatever's supposed to happen. And of course, I was then, kind of given the honor of being by her side every week until she did pass. And we got to talk about, the fear of the inevitable, and what it's like to be the night before it happened. I was sitting next to her and we were both just crying about how scary it was, but that's where we were. So I get to be part of those processes a lot. And I find that to be like a huge honor. Even
Cough,
okay,
Pluto, cough, cough.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Talk about deity work, though. I've also worked with animals, and
Mm.
not that they are deities, but they might as well be. They're like, they're their own, like, they're more like fae, kind of elemental, whatever energy. I know that, and I am aware of that, but especially dogs, they're too good for us. So when I work, like, I helped my one family dog pass, and was communicating with him as that process was happening. And it felt eerily similar to working with
Mhm.
deities as well.
Yeah. Fair enough. Very cool.
Like,
Well, I guess talking about Faye, I'll share this story. One time I was meditating and I kept I kept feeling, so I'm just gonna start here. When I talk about working with the Fae, I am absolutely not disregarding any particular culture's viewpoints on the Fae,
mm,
but because I'm not parts of those cultures, I have not read so much up on those lore. I have never been aligned with all of those views necessarily. And I have always just gone off of what I had channeled from my guides, what I have channeled from tons of Fae that I've worked with, which has been a lot of them, etc. So I don't necessarily have the same ideas or viewpoints as a lot of other culture stuff out there. And so if you don't agree with what I say, that is fine. You don't have to, but this is based off of my own experience and what I've channeled and who's come forward to chat with me. So I had been feeling for basically like a week or so. This was last year, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, pretty much this time, I guess
mm.
2-3 weeks from now last year. And I had been really feeling like I need to reach out to the Fae. They were kind of bugging me. We
I
have,
remember that.
yeah, we have some gnomes in our house, is who we have in our house. They hang out. They are really fond of Weston. They will hide things from him. all the time. He will go through like full cabinets, and I will watch, like I will physically watch him go through the cabinet looking for like this one thing. And then he'll have to be like, okay, this was a really fun game. Thank you for playing. Can I have this back now? I will play again later. And he will turn around and it'll be on the counter. Like, it is eerie. It happens all the time. So they're big fans of him. And they play with him quite a bit. I think they work with me a little bit less because Hope is around me so much. I think that they're just kind of like, and also Boris, my dragon, is here just chilling. And that's, when you're a gnome, that's a really big height difference. But anyway, so I was like really feeling pings, like I need to work with them. I need to give them some offerings, which is weird because before that, I'd work with the fairies on and off, but just not a ton. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll do some channeling and see who wants to talk to me. So I sit down, immediately in astral. And I was like, ooh, I didn't even try to astral project, but here I am. What are we doing? Which has happened not like a ton, but it's happened enough where I'm like, know what it is. And I'm not freaked out that I'm all of a sudden in astral. I'm just like, oh, I'm in astral. Here we are. And I go through this very like ocular shaped doorway and walk through there. And there was one of the queens of the fairies waiting for me on the other side. There are multiple. A lot of people say like the Morgan is one. There's many. This is one. I'm not going to share her name because she didn't want me to. So I never really have, but she was there. And she did like a number 2 with her fingers, like 2, gave me a hug and then tapped me on the third eye. And that was about it from her. And I was like, okay. For somehow I had the knowing that it was going to be 2 gifts that I was going to be given from them. And I was like, okay. And then I was immediately sitting in a tavern in a tree. Like immediately like whooshed. And then I was sitting in this tavern in this tree. It was very, I can't even describe it. It was multi-stories, but it shouldn't be. If that makes sense. Almost like dreamlike, where I was like, I don't know how the engineering of this functions. Like there's some interesting magic. And I was sitting across from a guy. He was short. He's definitely some type of fae. I don't think he was a gnome, but he had like a very fun demeanor. He was round. He was incredibly huggable, but much shorter than me. And he gave me tea because he was drinking beer and I'm allergic to beer, which I thought was really sweet. He was like, here, have some tea. It's like, thank you. And then he handed me a handful of acorns and ferns. There was like ferns from it too. And he was like, those are for you. And I was like, are these the 2 gifts, the acorns and the ferns? And he was like, part of it. And then he started laughing. And then I was back in my body, just that quick. And it was only about 15 minutes. It felt much longer to me. It was about an hour for me, I think. But like time on my clock in this body, 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, I guess they did want to do stuff. I'm not entirely sure what the deal is, but I immediately went and I got a box for a bunch of crystal offerings for them. I'm like, obviously they're around. They want to make sure that we're, here. The way one of the gifts played out, I'm not really going to talk about because it was like very intense. Krista knows about it and it's like way too much for the podcast to share how one of the gifts played out. And that was the gift associated with the acorn. But I was literally, I think 2 weeks later, my sewage pipe broke underneath my house. And we had to leave the house. And of course, my darling husband used the word evacuate, and I had just been evacuated for the fire. And so my like immediate trauma response was like, okay, I know where the important documents are. I know where this is. I know where that, like, and he was like, whoa, like, we're just going to leave the house for a week while they like, we can come back and forth. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. So I was already like freaking out about it, not because of the fact that we had to leave, but it was like, my landlord was really misogynistic about, it was just all sorts of bad. But we secured a B&B and I was like, all right, fine. But it was going to cost a fair chunk of money to stay at this B&B, but I didn't even care. They accepted pets, whatever. I walk in and there's this huge poster-sized picture of all these different types of ferns. Just like categorizing them. Like, this is this type of fern and that's that type of fern. And I was like, oh, this is the other gift. It was the house. It wasn't actually the house. It was the fact that my renter's insurance paid for the entire thing within a week. Like, before we had even left the rental house, I had in my account the money for the entire stay. And that was very much their other gift. So me and the Fae we have a fun relationship.
Yeah.
But that was a very intense deity experience to have for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember listening to those stories as they played out last year, and it was really fun. It was cool to be able to like be on the edge of our seats trying to see like what's the fern gonna be. But yeah, really cool.
And now I have a fern tattooed on my arm with my Mercury bee because that seemed applicable.
Yeah. Well, you also have some deity stories regarding, speaking of Mercury, Hermes.
Yeah, I don't know if have I not shared it on here before? Me and Hermes are play fighting.
Yeah, I know you've shared it on TikTok, but like summarize it at least for everybody on the podcast because it's a good one.
Yeah, me and Hermes are play fighting. So basically what happened is I got a hamster. I just took it downstairs. Dang it, I would show it. He's a warmie and I needed a grounding tool that was like a stuffed animal that could be warm and sit on my lap when I'm like channeling and stuff because I wanted to be comfortable. So I got a hamster and I was like, because he's a hamster and he's cute as shit. And I was like, oh yay, what should I name it? Because I name everything. And immediately Apollo comes through and is like, Hermes, and just dies laughing. And I was like, shit. Now I can't not name it Hermes. Not because Apollo asked, but every time I look at it, no matter what I try to name it, it's going to be Hermes now because you just came and did that. So I was like, okay, Hermes the hamster. He's going to be so mad at me. So sorry. And immediately could feel that Hermes was displeased with this development, significantly displeased. So then over Mercury retrograde, he was not super stoked with me. He kept poking at me. And then I went to go live with Rebecca the Ghost Guide. And he's one of her main guides. She talks about it all the time. And she always lights a candle for communication, obviously, Hermes, when doing a live. And she went to light it and he stopped her, was like, not if you're doing a live with her, and like denied me a candle lit. When she came on, she was like, Hermes is mad at you. I don't know what that happened. I was like, that would be my fault. So that happened. And then I responded with what? What did I do? I forgot now. Dang it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know it turned into like a little prank war.
It did. What did I do? Oh gosh, no, I'm not going to remember. This is probably his doing, to be totally honest.
Yeah, I mean, Mercury is memory too.
I know, that's what I'm saying. And I've been having an absolute awful time with memory for the last week since I did this last thing.
Today, as we're speaking as well, Mercury is also forming a sextile with Pluto. So those two teaming up against you.
I wrote it down. Me and Pluto have a good relationship, but
oh yeah, Pluto's, I mean, I feel Pluto very intimately in my energy. And one of the things that Pluto would say to that is basically like, we have a good relationship, as in you are in his good graces, which is fine. It's kind of hard to get out of them though, because we're so entertaining. So
right. Okay, well, oh, that's what it was. I stitched Epic the Musical because there was so if you haven't looked up Epic the Musical on TikTok, it's incredible. It is such a beautiful work of art. I cannot wait till the concept album comes out.
Yeah,
I love it. It's basically the Odyssey as musical, but it's like very applied to the real world.
Favorite.
Well, the Hermes song came on and the actor playing Hermes is just flamboyant and lovely and like kind of a surfer bro at the same time. And I stitched it and I was like, that's what Hermes energy looks like to me, which it is.
Well,
he was not stoked on it.
Yeah, but did you see who's playing Hermes in the Percy Jackson series on Disney now?
Okay, yes, Lin-Manuel Miranda is, which I was super excited about. And so that came up and I was like, oh no, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Like I played the last checkered, like the chess piece on the board was me stitching this thing of Hermes and being like, that's what he looks like to me. And then now literally the last week, he's been 100% messing with my memories. Like not in the point of like recreating them differently, but just taking things away and not important things. He's just very, and I can feel it every time it happens. I'm like, this is you. So currently me and a god are play fighting.
Yeah.
It's great.
When time and distance mean nothing to you and you can just do whatever you need to do and this thing, it's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's, I think, probably my move at this point. So we'll see what I end up. And it's also, I just want to say, I'm not intentionally play fighting with Todd.
Yeah.
This was an accident, but here we are.
And I also kind of forgot, like I would be remiss if I said that I didn't do other deity work because I literally do deity work with the planets every week.
Yeah.
And the planets are, especially in the worldview that kind of goes along with astrology, especially in astrological magic. There are spirits associated with the planets, and even archangels or angels are associated with the planets, and they're just part of that chain of existence that happens between creation and us. And so every week when I'm working with channeling my skits in and channeling in those scripts, I'm saying, hey, you two, you're talking to each other. What's that conversation look like? And there will be moments where I'm not a person who chooses to use profanity in order to express my exacerbation. I use transits. So I will yell, Mercury retrograde or Mars retrograde, or like all the time, Uranus and Taurus. Uranus and Taurus has been messing with me because he's been sitting on my sun. So I feel personally attacked by Uranus right now. In the pantheon, you could either see Uranus as Uranos, the sky, or there's been an argument that he's Prometheus. I think right now he's a little bit more chaotic than awakening. So I would say, it's a really cool little essay by Richard Tarnas. It's called Prometheus the Awakener. Definitely worth a read if you're interested in it. And I think the ends are usually Promethean. The means might be a little bit Uranian. So it's a really cool thing. It's the argument of, should we have named the planet Uranus Prometheus? But I think there's a nifty blend from my own experience, my own channeling, and my own, witnessing. Of course, I don't do talismans and things for Uranus because there is no essential dignity assigned to Uranus outside of modern astrology. And I like to go with the more traditional sources that have been practiced and experimented with. I don't think I'll be the first to experiment. I choose not to be the first to experiment with a Uranus kind of talisman. That's a little, I think the outer planets are more forces of nature. We let them do what they do. Yeah. I don't personally, in my experience with them, they are, and truly even their names, they're the Titans rather than the gods. So they're not as much involved with human goings on. And for anybody listening, yes, Saturn, Kronos, is also a Titan, but it's the boundary between the old and beyond, and the old gods and the current, or the ones who do interact with us. So that is why Saturn is a boundary. That is why Saturn is the greater malefic, because will Saturn side with you? That's up to Saturn. So you can appeal to Saturn, but beyond that, it's very much, especially with Uranus being revolutionary and chaotic and unpredictable, Neptune being nebulous, and Pluto being let's say chaotic, neutral at best, but transformative. Those aren't energies that we really want to be calling into our lives. You can use some of the more personal and social planets to do that. So anybody who's exploring astrological magic and you're like, but I want to try Uranus, go with Mercury. You'll get even more personal and achievable results that are actually applicable to your life, that you can curate. You can more go to the store and pick out the coat you want, rather than having someone just dump coats on you that you didn't get a say in how they happened or what they are.
It's like chaos magic versus actual concentrated witchcraft, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's primordial magic, and you just want to it's like in Addie LaRue, those are the gods that answer at night. Just let them do what they're going to do. They have a purpose. They're not necessarily bad, but they are in Egypt, they call the gods netters. They're natures. And I definitely agree with that across the board, but I think I agree with that even more profoundly with the outer planets, Saturn kind of included, but especially beyond. Yeah, that's my preferred sort of pantheon, is just working with the planets who also associate with the, they have expressions of the different deities that you find in the other pantheons as well. So it's nice.
Yeah.
They're my buddies.
Yeah. I mean, I have a 10 more deity stories. One last, just a little quick one. Loki brought me my husband, and it was chaos.
That's right.
I think I've told that story on here before, but just to call that back in, my son, when he was a toddler, accidentally chanted Loki multiple times, 3 times to be exact. He chanted Loki's name 3 times in a row. And right then my now husband got in a car accident, was forced to come to my house. So that's how it happened. And I had never met him before. Which is funny. I'm extremely Norwegian also, so it's kind of on brand for me to have that level of physical interaction with that particular pantheon of deities. Also, I just want to say, in my opinion, Loki is a they them.
Oh yeah.
So I always would call that out, because they're kind of a trending on brand deity right now for people. like
Yeah.
because of Marvel. It's because of Marvel. I'm
Yeah,
just
for sure.
Hades and Persephone
But
and Loki
I
are
think
what's
even
going on.
Marvel would consider Loki to be gender fluid too.
Yeah.
Because if you've seen the season. But yeah, I have understood, at least in my context, pronouns if I'm going to use them for each of the planets. And Mercury is very gender fluid. And then it's pretty much like they, them from Uranus outward, because like, don't assign me something. What did you do with that? Like, how did you create this thing? I don't know what that is. Leave it off of me. So yeah.
So just gonna throw that out there. If you want to work with Loki, also Loki will usually choose the most ridiculous thing to have on an altar as a representation of them. So get ready for absolute absurdity. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I have a lot more. I know you have a lot more deity stories, but we are kind of running out of time here. And I do want to get to our question really quick so we can answer that question super fast. Again, our questions, our topics come from our Patreon. Please join us there, participate there. If you have questions on this sort of stuff too, you can ask there. Of course, you can also ask on our YouTube. It's just not a guarantee that we're going to respond in that space, but you can also just throw in any comments if this is helpful to you. We really love interacting with you on YouTube still, so feel free to do that. This question again comes from our Patreon. Where did it go? There it is. Okay. The question is, I think I have a subconscious resistance to channeling. Super curious about that and wondering if it's probably a fear-based thing or if it can come from kind of fear-based stuff to have that resistance.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like, hold on, I can't answer that question.
So should I kind of jump in first?
Yeah, if you feel like it, sure. I mean, I also have stuff to say, but yeah, I think it's a quick answer. But
I think this really relates back to what we talked about either in the last episode or the episode before that about like being afraid of your abilities. In this case, just pulling in some of the energy going on with the full context of that question, especially if you were raised in a church setting. Or raised, with parents and you had a good relationship with your parents for the longest time. And there was this like traditional kind of understanding. It can feel like you're letting people down by exploring that. It can feel like you're doing something wrong. So one of the things I would explore is this sort of like, who's mad at you for doing it? Are you mad at you for doing it? Are your parents mad at you for doing it? Or is God mad at you for doing it? If God is mad at you for doing it, that's a religious kind of belief that you've been given. You might actually have a better relationship with God if you use the abilities that God gave you. And by God, of course, I'm referring to the creator. If it's your parents, then that's a family dynamic that was brought up. And like there are conditions within your relationship with your parents that maybe if those were released, you'd have a better, clearer, fuller relationship with your family, or at least unconditional love there. If it's yourself, then you've had an experience that scared you. And so you want to like explore what was the experience? How can I see that as from an objective perspective now that I'm, distanced from it by time and space? And is it something I want to pursue? Or is it something that like, I'd rather not have that in my life? You don't have to tap into abilities if you have them. You do have the choice to, though. They are there. So that's kind of where I would come from on that.
I would also explore the I'm just a little human, I can't do magic energy, because oftentimes when it's like a subconscious resistance, it feels like I believe in that for everyone else, just not for me.
Oh, I've heard that so much.
And so it's a you're not strong enough, you're not good enough, whatever it is. Look at that sort of energy too, especially if it feels like I can't identify where this block is coming from. Why can't I channel? Chances are good it's a worthiness thing you're unwilling to look at. And that's always the place I recommend diving into and looking at first, which is not fun, but it really will be helpful to be like, oh, I'm viewing myself as lacking here or there, and just deciding on a new belief that every time those thoughts come up, you're going to say instead, that in and of itself will make a huge difference. Switching that out. So I think that's it for this episode. Do you have?
Yeah, I think so. Just reminding everybody that we are going to have that extra video coming out of us doing a card pool kind of example. I think that's a Patreon thing too.
It is.
But that's something to look forward to. I'm excited about it. So
yeah, we do a bonus video for our top tier patrons every month, and that's this month, so we're really stoked on that. Couple real quick things for me, if you don't mind me plugging these in. I have started a texting membership, which I'm really excited about, where I get to send you texts all the time, basically. And also once a month, a meditation or activation video that I have created exclusively for this group. But if you want more information about that, go to emilydexterpsychic.com and you can look up all that stuff. I'm just really excited and super proud of it. And it's been really fun already to have kind of if you want to go deeper, like if you struggle with consistency with your spirituality and you want at least one time a month where you're going to be reminded to do something, that's kind of why I designed it this way. But yeah, so that's on there. And also I'm going to have some Black Friday deals on my classes coming up on Black Friday, which I don't usually do. I've never had a sale on my classes before ever, but I don't usually subscribe to Black Friday. But my guides were like, "No, we're doing it," and I was like, "Okay." So here we are. So that's also the information is going to be on there, but that's going to start on probably honestly it's going to be probably Thanksgiving sale is what I'm going to call it. So it's going to start on the day of thanks and then continue that Monday. But it's very limited and I've never done this before. So if you're interested in my big course but didn't want to take it because the price point was really high, it will be discounted for the first time ever. So
cool.
Yeah, just a couple
definitely worth
it there. Thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, thank you all so much. Have fun as we start having everyday transits. But yeah, we hope you take all of this energy and that you
go make some magic.
I think it was good. Think to me it sounded good.
I'm so glad it sounded good for you.
One way of putting it. Okay. Goodbye.
Okay.